So, as you can tell, I've divided this up into part one and part two. Part one talks about war, and then war, and after that, war. Part two talks about taxes, talks about disagreement with king and parliament, mob violence, irate colonists, those kinds of things, with which some of you are already quite familiar. Key terms. We getting close? Okay. Cautionary note, if I may. Remember, class, that anything that is key term adjacent, fair game for the midterm exam, right? If it ties to a key term, it may show up on the midterm exam. So keep that in mind as we go forward and as you're taking notes and stuff. So hopefully that way you don't miss anything. Okay. Well, first, a little explanation, difference between the 7 Years' War and the French and Indian War. So, the French and Indian War started in North America in 1754. It ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1763. If you do the math class, you will notice immediately that war lasted 9 years. The 7 Years' War did not last 9 years. 7 Years' War began in 1756. And it expanded conflict that was already going on in North America to Europe, the Caribbean, and South Asia. It too ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1763. So clearly there's a great deal of overlap. The 7 Years' War starts up in North America. So we end up with some slight differentiation here. The big thing here is Britain is all about the paperwork. So for 2 years, Britain and France are fighting in North America, fighting and killing each other. These people are, but Britain's like, I'm sorry, we can't really officially start this war, like call it a war war until we get the paperwork done, get that filed. So, 2 years into the war, Britain finally declares war on France, and France is like, yeah, we know we've been fighting for the last 2 years, thanks, got it. But so, the 7 Years' War tends to be like the British version of this war. In the United States, we tend to talk about it only as the French and Indian War. But I think it's worth noting that there is this difference. It's all part of the same animal, but it kind of focuses on different things, slightly different time periods. So there are essentially two things that happen that put the pieces in place for this war to erupt. Okay, so settlement, New France. So this area here, one historian has referred to this area as the middle ground. I'll put E here for English, F for France, MG for middle ground. So you will notice, if you're reading the textbook, you will notice the textbook uses this thing, like adopts this historian's way of looking at this. The textbook picks up on that. But the scholar's book, it's called The Middle Ground. Anyway, he said that Native Americans living in this region during this time period basically lived in a relatively decent position. They did some trading with either side, but either of these European powers. But they've carved out this triangle, this middle ground, where they can do their own things, live their own life, whatever. Two things happen on the middle ground to cause the war to, like, the earliest pieces to get put into place. One, your textbook talks about in some detail, and it's one of the key terms in your textbook too, by the way, but Memeskia. He is, if I remember right, a Miami Indian, and he invites people to come settle in here. He invites a settlement. So they come, and so what he's done essentially is violate the middle ground by saying, sure, so you guys can come settle here. Your textbook talks about that one. In class, you and I will focus on some plans of Virginia planters. The year is 1747. So you'll notice going back in time to put things into proper context. But a number of prominent Virginia planters, including two brothers of some fella named George Washington, formed the Ohio Company of Virginia. Notice the name. Do you remember the Virginia Company of London? And it meant, we're interested in Virginia, headquarters is in London. Well, this one is the Ohio Company of Virginia, which means we're interested in the territory called Ohio. Headquarters of this business is in Virginia. So, they want to invest in lands to the west of the Appalachians. They're looking to make some serious money off of land speculation. And they happen to mention this to the monarch, because they gotta get permission if they're gonna do something about it. So they get a charter from the monarch who says, okay, look, y'all can have 200,000 acres near the forks of the Ohio River in what's today western Pennsylvania. But the crown says, look, I'm not doing this out of the goodness of my heart, just so you can get wealthy. He says, I want an empire that rivals Spain's. So if I'm giving you this 200,000 acres, you will promise me that you're going to settle families on the land, you're going to create cities, we're gonna colonize the area, put British folks out there, and lay claim to the land, before France decides to. So, these guys are like, okay, got it, we'll settle, they promise it, like, don't worry, man, we will settle 100 families. That's our magic number, gonna settle 100 families in this area. So, 1750, the representative of the company was sent to go out into part of the middle ground, the part where they were given land, most of their western Pennsylvania, and told basically, you know, well, this guy's going, he's trying to find just the right spot to survey, carve up into plots and sell to settlers. So, he ends up, well, he comes in, comes back with his report, the company decides to select an area that today would be in western Pennsylvania and present day West Virginia. Let's see if we've got that map. Where's that map? Okay, hold on. Okay, this is the map. Okay, this one shows you the middle ground. So this is the so-called middle ground. And this teardrop shape, this is where the Ohio Company of Virginia is gonna, you know, carve up the land, sell it to settlers. So this is the area where they've decided to settle. But you'll notice, given this fact, they're getting awfully close to French Louisiana. Very, very close to French Louisiana. Which is gonna make the French uncomfortable, shall we say? So, France finds out about this deal, about the charter from the British king, the whole operation. France freaks out. France reacts by building a whole string of forts in the contested area, in the so-called middle ground. So they go in there, they're building forts everywhere, French forts, and you know the message is, dear England, colonists, king, anybody, you're not having this land. You're not taking it. It's ours. Get lost. Scram. So it just so happened that one of the shareholders in the Ohio Company of Virginia was the governor of the colony of Virginia. So he totally freaked out. He completely freaked out over these forts the French were building. He's like, oh no, we're not doing that. Not happening. So, in 1753, he decides to address this matter by sending the little brother of a couple of, you know, his business partners out into the middle of this so-called middle ground to tell France to get lost. George Washington. George Washington is selected. He is not part of the Virginia Company, his brothers are, but he's told, George, you are gonna ride out there and you're going to tell the French folks that that they are trespassing on Virginia land. And tell them to get the heck off. He's like, okay, I can do that. So off the dude goes. 21 years old, he goes off, delivers the memo, turns around and comes back. The governor was apparently so pleased with Mr. Washington's little expedition that when he gets back, the governor says, hey George, I'd like to put you in charge of a small military expedition, and I'd like you to go back out, this time with, you know, military dudes, and really claim the land for Britain. Make sure that you're sending a message to France that says, hey, we're not messing around. Yes, we've notified you to get lost. Now we're out here. We're going to defend with arms Virginia's right to this land. So, one of the new forts that France built was Fort Duquesne. Anybody happen to know what large U.S. city stands here now? Western Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh.
What?
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Emmitsburg sends their they. So, the tricky part, so part of Mr. Washington's thing is like, he's told, go to Fort Duquesne, and they're like, he's supposed to, engage them, but the thing is, he's told, you gotta be careful, we're looking at, public relations, we don't want bad optics on this thing, so you need to make sure it looks like France is the instigator here. France is the bad guy, so, they're like, in other words, don't go on the offensive, don't look like it's all you. He's like, okay, I got this. Off he goes with 160 Virginians and a small group of Mingo Indians. Side note, the small group of Mingo Indians, very crucial. The war, French and Indian War, officially broke out in May 1754, when the Mingo chief, who had gone with George, led a detachment of his soldiers to French camp in the woods. 14 Frenchmen were wounded in the initial fight, and so Washington is chatting with the commanding officer, trying to work on negotiation, whatever. And while he's doing that and a bit distracted, the Mingo Indians rise up and kill all of the French soldiers, and they pack up and leave. And George Washington's like, dude, what are you doing? What the heck are you doing? And he's like, you might have thought we had the same agenda, but we don't. Mingo chief is going, I am doing my own thing to pit you two guys against each other to protect the middle ground, keep it safe for me and my people, and you guys can stick it. George Washington's like, great, sure, start a war, and get up, and leave. We'll have more to say about this next time. You may follow the example of the Mingo Indians and get up and leave.